Welcome to the TSA AGM. My name is Sanjay Sethi and I'm the chair of the charity. The AGM is always a good point to reflect on the year that we've had and the road ahead. It's also a period when we mark the change of our trustees, with some people leaving and some people coming up for re-election and some leadership changes. This year, it has been scarred with some sadness, unfortunately, for the charity and for the trustees. Our Vice Chairman, Robert Woodthorpe-Brown, CBE, passed away last week. Robert was due to be here today to set out his vision for the charity as we were to rotate between us, the chair and vice chair roles. He's not, and he'll be missed. Over his time as trustee, he led many meetings and he did so with such warm energy. In times when we've had to make very difficult decisions for the charity, he's always provided me personally with very much steadfast support. We will endeavour in the fullness of time to try and relay to the community the fullness with which Robert supported the charity and the void that he leaves behind. Our thoughts and prayers are with his loved ones at this time. For those who are unfamiliar with the format of an AGM, the order of proceedings would have been set out in a cover letter or the web page. It's also on screen. As you can imagine, with the cover letter and the web-based approach of us distributing the proceedings for the AGM, it's been sent to all supporters of the charity. You'll recall that we're a members-based organisation that have long since stopped collecting dues. This has not changed the level of transparency that we'd like to offer to the community at large. You'll also recall from our last AGM our plans to right-size the charity, and you'll see that we made substantial progress in this respect, balancing more closely income and expenditure. I think it's important to state that we are here today to approve the accounts for 2021, and that's the first order of business. That will feel like a very long time ago for all of us, particularly as the country has moved to a place of instability once more post-pandemic with a new war in Europe that has put our economy on less sure footing. This less sure footing is certainly affecting our community with the cost of living crisis and persistent cuts in our public services, which affect us more acutely when we think about primary care and drug discovery to licensing, which we all know has affected certain cannabinoid drugs being approved in England latterly. But through all this uncertainty, you should rest assured that we're here fighting for you. We remain rewarded by the goodwill and our commitment of our dedicated staff, now smaller in number and taking on more strain. This smaller team has highlighted its own weaknesses when staff leave, like our former formidable CEO, Louise Fish, and our head of fundraising, Michaela. It does make continuity of service harder, particularly during this rehiring phase. You will have noted that Louise was at first replaced by an external candidate, John Shepherd, who was introduced to you in SCAN. His appointment was short-lived, however, due to medical issues that he subsequently began to suffer from once he took appointment at the TSA. John has now been replaced by our own in-house solution, which comes in the form of our former head of communications and our former head of research, who now jointly act as CEO. You'll meet Peter and Luke later when Martin will interview them. We're sorry that we're not able to bring people together for the big day, but rail strikes cannot interrupt a video call. Hence the longer format today of the AGM, where we've also asked Chris to speak on research, which we know that is something the community really love to follow. I'll now turn to our wins for 2021. So I think it's well publicised what how our three goals really are. I like to term them slightly differently. So I call the first one reach, the second research, but the third one resilience. And that's resilience in the charity. And I think resilience has become a watchword since COVID into these more difficult times with the cost of living crisis. So first, reach. There have been many ways that we've maintained contact with the community through online events and community events to our newsletter. Our aim was to have 3,700 people on our community list, and we have over 5,000 on that list now. You also have seen a new look e-bulletin, which means that we're able to stay in contact with a lot more people a lot more often. Also, if you've used the support line, you'll note that there are a variety of ways you can receive support, whether that's through web chat, email, or conventional chat. Moving on to research. We still obtain very good value from our research grants of the past. We've awarded in the past with 11 grants submitting data for this year and 9 grants reporting in 10 publications this year. Our continued membership of AMRC demonstrates our ability as a small charity to punch well above its weight. However, the highlight of 2021 was hosting the International Research Conference. And for those who attended, you'll have seen how important it was to bring clinicians together, but also to harness our own domestic expertise. Now on to resilience. It's fair to say this was achieved by slashing expenditure, as well as making more diversified gains in income. Again, hosting the research conference last year helped. From a fundraising and partnership perspective, we remain indebted to Sir David Suchet, who continues to raise not only substantial sums of money, but raise the profile of the charity. We're of course very grateful to all our donors like Hiscox and Softcat, who continue to support the charity. And we also will highlight grants and foundations and other major donors at the end of this presentation. So now to the business of the meeting and to delve into the numbers a little bit more. Luke will now share a recording from our treasurer, who will give you a summary of last year's accounts.
Good evening. I'll begin with an introduction. My name is Rajan Kullar and I'm the treasurer for the TSA. I've undertaken a variety of financial management roles throughout my career, and I use my skills and experiences to support the management team and trustees deliver its strategy. That strategy includes the goal to reach financial self-sufficiency by reducing expenditure and increasing income to balance the books and create a sustainable operation to support the TS community in the years ahead. The headlines: 2021 was the second year of the TSA's transformation plan and was unfortunately still impacted by COVID. Despite the disruption, the net deficit was only £33,000. This was an improvement on 2020. Headline income increased by £25,000 on the previous year to £444,000. However, the headline numbers are flattered by higher conference income and receipts from grants. If you were to adjust out the one-off items in both years, income would be about £73,000 lower than the previous year. The TSA continues to actively manage its cost base in a much changed world. We were able to reduce costs by £138,000 with lower spends on overheads and research costs. This included a reduction in headcount. This more than offset higher one-off conference costs in the year. In summary, the TSA delivered a net deficit before investment gains of £33,000. However, once you adjust out one-off grants and the impact of the conference, the charity is well over £100,000 from break-even. Unsurprisingly, the TSA saw a reduction in the value of its cash and investment assets in 2021. The value of these assets was used to fund research and sustain the continued operation of the charity. Our creditors of £207,000 include £142,000 of research commitments. 2021, our financial summary. As you can see, we have a very low proportion of our costs related to governance, only 3%. Governance costs include our audit fees and other professional fees. So 27 pence of every pound is invested in fundraising. But for every pound invested in fundraising, the TSA generates £3 back to support other operations. We continue to show progress in our journey to balance the books, with income going up and expenditure going down. However, as we all know, 2022 has been a challenging year politically and economically, which impacts the environment in which the TSA operates. We are not being complacent. On behalf of the trustees, I'd like to thank the TSE community and the TSA team for their continued support. Thank you.
So Rajan couldn't be with us this evening, which is why he did a pre-recording. But I think we've got sufficient numbers of trustees who are quite familiar with the accounts should there be any questions later. I think we'll move on to motion 1 then.
So the first motion is to vote on the following. So you should see on your screen a window will pop up when I tell it to vote in this. So so please vote on the following: to consider and, if thought fit, adopt the accounts of the association for the year ended 31st of December 2021 and the reports of the trustees and auditors thereon. Let me just get this up. And hopefully you can all see that. Oh, I can see some people. Oh, that's good. People must be able to see because it's coming through. Okay, so right now it's 100% for yes. I'll just give that another few seconds to see if there's any more going to come in. Yeah, I think we can. Just giving that another second. There's 1 or 2 more. Yeah, I think we can say that that's been passed.
Okay, so moving on to the second order of business, which is really concerning the trustees. As you know, at each AGM, the board is rotated and trustees evaluated for the future to determine whether it is time for them to step down or whether they would like to retire from the board or stand for re-election. This AGM, we have 2 trustees who have provided notice that they would like to retire from the board. One is Lisa Shusay, who brought us the nexus to Sir David and has been particularly helpful to the fundraising team with her perspective as the former CEO of the Nationwide Foundation. And from the research team, from her perspective as a carer. Patrick Bolton has also due to step down, and he has obviously given us a great view as a clinician and also as a researcher. So both of their expertise will be very much missed by the board. With trustees stepping down, it's always timely for us to once again ask the community if they feel like they could add value as a trustee. We would welcome applications, particularly from clinicians and people with the background of either finance or care, with which we are relatively understaffed as a trustee board. So if you feel like you could be a trustee, please get in touch. Then there are the remaining trustees, and those are labelled under items 3A to 3D. From these remaining trustees, there are a number who are up for reappointment, which means that they are appointed to the board a while ago, in some cases 3 or 4 years ago. So it's right to refresh their appointment under our governance policy. You'll see that the following are up for re-election, of which I am one of those people. So it's probably not appropriate for me to run this motion, which is why I'm going to hand over to Luke and Pooja.
Yeah, no problem at all. So the same as last time. So this time, please vote to re-elect, if thought fit, following as trustee Sanjay Sethi. So launching that poll now. I'll give everyone a minute. They all came in very quickly this time. Yeah, I'll give that just a few more seconds. Yeah, just a couple more seconds. Okay, I think we can say that that's definitely passed. So that is 100% for yes. Great, thank you all. So next we have to re-elect, if thought fit, the following as trustee, Dr. Francis Elmsley. So again, if everyone can just please vote. Yeah, I'll just give that a few more seconds. Again, they all come in very quickly. Yeah, I think we can agree that that one's done. So 100% yes again. Now for 3C, to re-elect if thought fit, the following as trustee, Anne-Marie Cotton. Yeah, I'll just give it another second. Yeah, again, all nice and quick there. So 100% for yes. And last but certainly not least, to re-elect if thought fit, the following is trustee Jane Rogers. Yeah, I think that was the quickest so far. So 100% for yes there. So that is all done.
I guess now we have to move on to the election of our vice chairwoman. As mentioned at the outset of this meeting, we sadly have lost Robert Woodthorpe Brown, and he was due to be the chairman of the charity, and I was due to step down to be vice chair. With the circumstances that the charity now faces, I'm staying on as chair, but we needed to find a new vice chair. And so Frances has gratefully stepped up to offer her services as vice chairwoman. So I'd like to pass a motion to make Dr. Frances Elmsley vice chairwoman of the charity.
Thank you, Sanjay. So the same again, if everyone can please vote. Yeah, it's all looking good. And again, 100% in favour there. So that's passed. Great.
Before we move on, I'd like to say a thank you to my fellow trustees too for volunteering their time. The board benefits from very, very busy professionals, some of whom juggle that with being carers and also practitioners. I just want to say thank you for continuing to find time to support the charity. So we're up to our final resolutions now, and these resolutions concern Tudor John, our independent examiner, and we have two motions regarding them. One is to reappoint them as our independent examiner, and the other is to authorize their pay, essentially. Tudor John were only appointed last year, you'll remember, and we considered this appointment as a replacement to an auditing function, which was considered overly costly and burdensome for a small charity. So we moved to this model, and I think we could say quite safely that we're quite content with their performance to support both of these motions. So Luke, I'll leave it to you to run the polls.
Thank you. So this is to reappoint Tudor John as independent examiners to hold office until the conclusion of the next general meeting of the association, before which accounts are laid. So if everyone can please vote. Yeah, that's everyone. 100% for yes, so that's passed.
Great. Did that also include motion 6?
Yeah, so motion 6, to authorise the trustees to determine the remuneration of the independent examiners. So once more, everyone. Yeah, excellent. So I can see that that's passed also, and that's all the votes of the evening, I think.
Yep. So we can move on to the more fun stuff, I guess. And that's handing over to Martin to introduce our new joint chief executives, Pooja and Luke, who we are really, really grateful for in stepping up into this role. So Martin, over to you.
Great. Well, as we've heard, we've now got 2 chief executives for the price of 1. Well, not quite, but we've got 2 chief executives, Luke and Pooja. Luke taking refreshment and Pooja smiling on us very, very elegantly indeed. Luke and Pooja, how does it work having 2 chief executives and what do each of you do?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first on that. Thank you, Mark, for such a nice introduction. So how it works, essentially, it's the 2 heads are better than 1, I suppose, in this situation. So myself and Pooja come from quite different backgrounds. So myself, my background is in very much communications and public relations, and in support as well. So for the past 3-4 years, I've been blessed to be at the TSA as head of communications and support, and now stepping up into the role of chief executive. And then with Pooja's incredible background as well, which I'm sure Pooja will be able to go through as well, we sort of link together two sides of the same coin very much. I can lean on Pooja, and Pooja can do the same for me. In day to day, we continuing the roles that we were doing, but it's just with the added CEO requirements on top of that, and that's sort of how the joint bit comes into it. So we can support each other doing chief executive parts as well as our other parts of the TSA. I'd say, yeah. Have you got anything that you can add to that, Pooja?
Thank you, Luke, and thanks, Martin. Just to give you a brief background about myself, I've been at TSA since June 2019, so coming up 3.5 years. I have worked in the charity sector for over 8 years now. Before that, I was a researcher, lab-based researcher, so I understand how research is conducted, and equally why patient voice is very important in research. So I came to TSA to basically bring that perspective to research, and I'm grateful to all the trustees for the opportunity that they've given me in terms of, it's a big responsibility to be a chief exec of a charity, but I'm also very grateful to Luke for being on my side. The main thing I think between Luke and myself is communication. When we took over the role, we agreed how we're going to work together. We have a joint vision, and we have joint values. We bounce ideas off each other. And I would say that, as Martin said, we double the experience and inspiration. So the main thing is I really enjoy working side by side with Luke and the amazing TSA team. In terms of our day-to-day, as Luke said, I'm still leading on all the research, policy and campaigning work. And we've kind of shared responsibilities in addition to carrying on our individual roles. So far, so good, really enjoying it. And I'm looking forward to delivering new objectives, new milestones for our TSC community in 2023.
Great. Many people will have interacted with you over the last 3-4 years because you've both been part of the TSA team for some time now. Given all that you've experienced, being out and about with the community and responding to various challenges in the office, what do you think are the biggest issues for the community going forward in this now, I hope, post-pandemic world?
I can start with that. I think for me, it's access to medicines and health inequality, which is the biggest challenge for the TSC community. We know it's not easy to get new drugs and treatments approved by regulatory bodies in the UK. A higher value is often put on the cost of the treatment rather than the quality of life of patients and their families and carers. We've seen this with everolimus, and we're now seeing it more recently with Epidiolex or cannabidiol, which in the first instance, NICE has not recommended for access on NHS England, even though authorities in Wales and Scotland have already approved the treatment for people with TSC. So we strongly believe that access to vital treatments should not come down to postcode lottery. We have already appealed this decision with help and input from TSC community, and we will continue to fight until cannabidiol is made available to every patient who needs it, no matter where they live. Moving forward, I think there's it's quite exciting time for the TSC community. There's a pipeline of new treatments being developed, tested. So we think we have our work cut out for us with regards to making sure that decision makers take patient voice into account when making decisions about treatments. So, and we will not stop working to bring these treatments to our TSC community.
Is there any way the community can help you in that, Pooja?
They already do. I think what we want is when we ask for their support, for their help, please come forward, share your experiences with us. You have no idea how valuable that is. Patient voice is the strongest voice, and that can really, really add value to any consultation, any appraisal that these authorities conduct. So please do come forward and share your experiences with us, which help us to then put your voice forward to these decision makers.
Thanks, Pooja. Luke, what's the biggest challenge as you read it?
Thank you. Well, I'll certainly reiterate everything that Pooja just said there in terms of access to medicine, and the TSC community has been absolutely phenomenal in helping us at this time and in the past as well. So for those that remember the everolimus for epilepsy campaign in particular, whenever we call on the TSC community, they always certainly respond when it comes to access to medicine. So thank you for that. But more broadly, in terms of the biggest challenges for me, one of the biggest hurdles for us right now is just that desire to bring the community back together again. You know, from the early years of the TSA, from going back to the 1970s when we first started, we've very much been a charity of togetherness. You know, you should never feel alone if you live with TSC, and that's certainly true with the Tuberous Sclerosis Association. What I would love to do is to really to hone in and to continue to bring back that feeling of community. I think we've done a lot over the past year or so, in particular during the days of COVID, when we were all spending a lot more time indoors and whatnot, and we started virtual events such as these. It helps bring people together. So that's what I would really love to make sure that we not only we maintain, but we emphasize it as well, to make sure we bring the most important people in all of this, which is the TSC community, in as much as we possibly can.
Are we going to meet face to face, do you think, in 2023?
Absolutely. So we're delighted to have the rescheduled big day after train strikes from this year. So we'll still be meeting in Manchester at the Inside by Melia in May, and then we'll also have the ever popular Outlook event for adults mildly affected by TSC, which is taking place in Leicester in April as well. So we'll have April and then May. So we'll have a bumper bumper 2 months of getting people together. But I would really, if anyone is on this call or listening afterwards and they've never been to a big day, I would really encourage you to come. It's the biggest event of the year for us. You get to connect with everyone affected by TSE who lives with TSE, and of course you can come talk to us and everything as well. So I would highly recommend it, and there'll be lots of details coming out very soon about that.
Great. Well, thank you both for working so hard for us. If people want to get in touch with you personally at any time, how do they do it?
Through many different means. So what we'll do is we've got some slides at the end actually with our contact details and more broad contact details for the TSA. So we'll have that up. But you know, pick up the phone, send an email, anything and everything. We're a small team who proudly punch above our weight. We'll get back to you as quickly as we can. We do encourage anyone and everyone, no matter how you're connected to TSE, to get in touch, because as I say, you are the reason we're here. You're the most important people in this.
Pooja, anything to add?
I'll just echo Luke's sentiments, and that just to reiterate, we have an open door policy. So please feel free to email us personally. You don't even have to use admin or a generic email. We will put up our email addresses at the end of the presentation. Email us directly, get in touch with us directly through phone, or even through support chat, the support line or chat, and we will respond to you as soon as possible. You will always get a response from us. That's a promise.
Well, you can't say fairer than that. Always get a response from us. That's a promise. On that note, I'll hand back to, I think the chief executives are going next, aren't they?
Yeah, I was going to say we can jump in to give Sanjay a rest there as well. So I'm going to reshare my screen, because we thought it would be a nice opportunity to just to sort of remind people what we delivered in 2022, and then also what we're looking at very broadly in our plans for next year as well. So there was quite a lot of change at the TSA, but we still got a lot done, a lot of very, very important things done. So it's nice to just to remind ourselves about that. So hopefully you can see this screen. I'm going to hand over to Pooja for this, and then I'm going to cover next year.
Thanks, Luke. As Sanjay mentioned, we've had a lot of changes at the TSA in 2022. Despite that, we are on schedule on delivering everything that we promised to deliver in our 2022 business plan. And some of the key highlights of our 2022 delivery so far have been that we've continued to bring people together for regular virtual events. We want to make sure that no one feels alone with TSA. This year, we've hosted record number of events. So we're really proud of that. In addition, we've developed an integrated package of support for individuals living with TSE and their families, especially on TAND or TSE-associated neuropsychiatric disorders, which can be delivered across our support line, website, social media, and regular monthly webinars. We held our first ever professional, we're developing first ever professional training modules on TSE for social and education professionals. And we've also submitted an application to NHS England for official accreditation of the NHS TSE Clinics Network as a recognized rare disease collaborative network. We also, this year, we carried out TSE census, and the idea was to better understand who the TSA is supporting, where are the gaps with regards to the people that we reach, and how can we reach them. We also launched a joint funding round with Epilepsy Research UK to fund new exciting TSE research. I think that the outcome of this fellowship will be announced around May 2023. But we're already excited that we're working with partners to make sure that the research agenda is always at the forefront for TSA. We also delivered a a joint funding round with Tandem Consortium and awarded Tandem seed grants to 3 successful applications. You can read about the successful grants on our website. In addition, thanks to our amazing TSC community, we've continued to strengthen the TSC Research Volunteer Network, which helps us make sure that the patient and voice is always at the heart of everything we do. So those have been more on the research side of achievements. In terms of campaigning work, in 2021, we worked with the All Wales Medicine Strategy Group, which recommends medicines to NHS Wales, and we got that approved, and we've carried that work on to 2020. So this was in 2021, and in 2022 we've carried on working with regulatory bodies in Scotland and England to bring cannabidiol to TSC community. This work is still ongoing because NICE has decided that they will not going to recommend. So we're working with other stakeholders to ensure that they reverse the decision. In addition, NICE has also started a consultation process to bring topical sirolimus cream for TSC-related facial angiofibromas approved for use in England. So those are some of the key achievements and deliverables that we've been working on in 2022. And over to you, Luke. You're on mute.
Thank you. Let me just go over to 2023. So the work continues. We're going to really focus a lot on innovative fundraising and income generation. So we always say it, but we truly can only be here if we get a wide range of income from people, whether that's individuals, groups, organizations, or trusts and foundations as well. So we want to really focus on that as much as we can next year to make sure that we make the most of our limited resources. A greater focus on peer-to-peer support and information. So this is something that the community has been asking for quite a long time, and it's something that we're keen to deliver as well, rather than a situation where we're sort of talking to the community. Why not get the community connected to each other, where so many different relationships and things can be developed. Cross charity campaigning. So the cannabidiol Epidiolex campaign that's happening right now, which we are leading on, is a good example of this. So by working with, for example, Genetic Alliance UK, SIBS, Carers UK, etc., we make our voice loud. We're a smaller charity, but if we're a smaller charity with other charities, the voice gets much louder, and we can be heard much more clearly. This year we are launching we're finalizing right now. We're hoping to launch in the next couple of weeks the very first education modules on TSC for social and education professionals. So it's the first that has ever been made, which is fantastic. We're hoping to expand that to further areas and specializations. So, for example, it could be clinical experts like GPs, for example. We could do that too, or perhaps other areas. We will be jointly funding a research fellowship with Epilepsy Research UK, which we're really delighted about. You may have seen that in the last scan that came out. We focused on that. Advocacy and campaigning in upcoming TSC medicines. So Pooja's mentioned that already with Epidiolex, topical sirolimus, and other things coming up. It is a very exciting time for the TSC pipeline, actually, and we're very keen to strike while the iron's hot on that. Continue to foster research collaborations at national and an international level. So again, engaging with other like-minded groups. This year and last year and other times we've had great success with the Tandem project, for example, which was great. And finally, engage with and influence relevant stakeholders, and really driving the TSA message. We're going to fly that TSA flag anywhere and everywhere, I can guarantee you, across all stakeholders, whether that's we're talking to other people or whether that's to the wider public or anything else. And that was everything. Just a quick snapshot. There will be time for questions at the end as well. I should hasten to add in case you think we're whizzing through everything. But yes, and I think next we are, I went the wrong way. We're delighted to have also a update from Dr. Chris Kingswood, who attended the 2022 TSE World Conference. And as Sanjay said, because we didn't manage to have Big Day this year because of the strikes, we were planning on having this at Big Day, so we thought, well, we'll have a condensed version tonight, which Chris was happy to do. So let me stop my screen now. Chris, I'm happy to share on your behalf, unless you would prefer. I don't mind either way.
Yes, please do share on my behalf.
Yeah, no problem. Let me just get that up. Things always take longer when you're trying to do them quickly, don't they? Okay.
Don't worry, I'll just say a couple of words while you're doing it. I mean, the nature of research is that it takes a long time to build up the clinical research, and projects are not just a year done and dusted, but they're 5-10 years from beginning to end. So although there was a research conference, or there was a conference this year at which research was presented, we'll come on to that. It was just a stage on ongoing projects. And if we go on to the next slide. So the major issues in TSC, as we know, are TAND and epilepsy. And I've divided TAND into affecting children, affecting adults, and epilepsy the same for a good reason, which I'll mention later. But we ought to think of those as two separate problems. The other major issues that affect people with TSC, of course, are skin. I've color coded, you'll see this, in red, yellow, or red, amber, and green. The red are the things that we still have a lot to do on. Amber are things where we're made quite significant progress. And of course, with topical sirolimus, about to burst onto, topical sirolimus is available. There are 3 companies fighting to get their product available on the NHS in the UK. We hope that one will do that within the next 12 months. So although it's available for some people in the UK, it will hopefully be available all over. And it's not the facial angiofibroma are not the only skin problem, but a lot of the others are less of an issue and can be treated in other ways. So I think we've made good progress. The place where we made most progress, of course, in the last decade is SAGA, kidney lesions and lungs. Providing we get to people early, then we can make a significant lifelong difference to that with mTOR inhibitors. And that getting to people to early plays back into early diagnosis, which I will mention later. And then there's the things that really the TSA as an advocacy organization has most effect on, rather than the researchers. The researchers can add bits, can do social research, find out what's going on, but really it needs powerful advocacy to make progress in education, employment, and care in the community. And the TSA, of course, that's one of its main missions, and it has made great progress, and it's still making progress even in our pandemic. Next slide, please, Luke. So with topical sirolimus, we're awaiting decisions from MHRA, that's our regulatory issue, and then from NICE. Awareness is important for picking up very early SAGA and kidneys and lung problems. And they're the specialist clinics which have been fostered and nurtured by the TSA over the years, have a particular role. But not just in seeing and advising on treatment of people, but also in raising awareness amongst other professionals, healthcare professionals throughout the UK. Next slide, please. And this was the World Conference in Dallas. A World Conference is really a get-together of families, not just from the United States, but from all over the world. It was about 2/3 American families and 1/3 international families were there. But the way they organize this in the United States is they also have research presentations, so the state-of-the-art lectures on what's going on and what the latest is. And this, of course, follows on the more strongly researched conference from the TSA the year before, and we hope there'll be a research conference next year. The research conferences are probably the single most best way of driving TS research, because it provides a forum for TS researchers to get together, to enthuse each other, and to exchange ideas and form collaborations. So over the years, this has been the biggest driving factor in TS research. And then the researchers look for funding, both from the TSA, but also from many other organizations. Next slide, please, Luke. Oh, and next, oh, thank you. Oh, no, back to the, that's it. So you can also think of success in research and treatment as either targeted treatment or supportive treatment for issues that affect caused by TSC. Targeted treatment is aimed at the fundamental causes, the things that go wrong in cells and in people that result in the manifestations of TSC. Supportive treatment is things like ordinary epilepsy drugs that just help control the problems. Next slide, please, Luke. So in the targeted section, we start with early intervention. In order to intervene in someone with TSC as early as possible to prevent problems, you need very early diagnosis, either prenatal diagnosis or in diagnosis soon after birth or in infancy. And that requires being able to find ways of picking up TSC before or as people are born. mTOR inhibitor therapy, because it precisely reverses a specific defect in people's TS cells, is a targeted therapy. And it's great for Sager's, kidneys, lungs, skins, and the odd lump and bump. But the problem with mTOR inhibitor and with everolimus, although it works for epilepsy, only about 1/3 of it gets into the brain. So in order to get high enough levels in the brain, for some people, you have to jack up the blood level so high they get significant side effects. What we really, really need is an mTOR inhibitor that crosses the blood-brain barrier 1-to-1, not just 1/3 of it. And the initial investigations and work to find that is already being done. So I think that's very exciting. Cannabidiol comes into targeted therapy as well, because cannabidiol has some specific effects on the cells in TSC beyond its ordinary anticonvulsant effect. And we'll come back to that in a moment. And then the other targeted therapies are things that we want to, therapies that would knock off TS cells. And obviously the earlier you do that, more completely you do that, the better the outcome. And the ideal would be gene therapy. Gene therapy is a possibility, but it's still a dream. We don't have enough tools or a robust mechanism for doing that yet, nor enough money going to that research. Next slide, please, Luke. And supportive therapy. So early intervention is important in supportive therapy as well, because the earlier you treat seizures and autism, the better the outcomes. And that's great when you pick up the problems early. Under supportive therapy comes cannabidiol because it is an anti-epileptic, and it is an effective one. And then Tandem, which I will talk about at the end. Next slide, please, Luke. I'm keeping my eye on the time so I don't run on too much. So targeted early intervention. So as I said, it relies on prenatal diagnosis. Already in the UK, 20% of people who have TSC are diagnosed before they're born with the ordinary normal fetal ultrasound. We could improve that if fetal ultrasounds were done at 4 or 5 weeks later, as well as early on. That would take up. And we can also, we do that or can do that in people with a family history. And the other way of screening is in people with a family history is to take a little sample from the placenta, which can be very effective if you know the gene mutation. But just around the corner, it's a possibility that we can pick up an unborn baby has TSC by screening the mother's blood. That's because some of the baby's cells cross into the mother's blood, and that's already done with some other genetic conditions. It's more tricky with TSC because the gene mutation in TSC, there's so many of them, but it is possible, and if we work on it, we will be able to do that. The other possibility is doing a blood test in newborns, in all newborns, to pick up those who might have overactive mTOR activity. And again, there's a blood test being developed that may well prove very useful in working out if someone's got too many TS or too many TS cells. And if that works, and if we can apply it to neonates, that will be a real advance. Next slide, please, Luke. So in targeted early intervention, there was the EpiStop and PREVENT studies, which I've spoken about before. The PREVENT is now winding to a halt. EpiStop has finished, but both of those were looking at treating people with TSC very early. The EpiStop was using vigabatrin, and it was really aimed at starting vigabatrin before the epilepsy became manifest, or even before someone started having epilepsy, when they developed an abnormal EEG, or if they've got TSC when they haven't got abnormal EEG at all yet. What it showed was that the outcomes in terms of much less refractory epilepsy, much less intellectual impairment, much less autism, were realized really. The people who had very early intervention had much better long-term outcomes, and similar findings from the PREVENT study, which was based in the United States. EXIST-3, which was a study of using everolimus for epilepsy, also showed that the earlier you start treating epilepsy effectively with something like everolimus, the more successful it is. That's led on to the STOP studies. The STOP studies were an idea in many people's minds for some years, but have finally come to fruition. And there's a series of studies led by Darcy Kruger and the American consortium, but spreading across the globe, to look at very early use of mTOR inhibitor treatment to see if they can prevent any manifestations of TSC at all in people who are known to be born with TSC. And we know already from the early hints that this is a very successful way of helping prevent people getting the more severe forms of TSC, which is really good news. Next slide, please. And of course, as I mentioned before, in targeted therapies, mTOR inhibitors are very successful for the things like SAGA and kidney AMLs, LAM, and skin lesions, where you don't need very much in terms of the blood level or very much in terms of the tablet to have a major effect in preventing them from progressing or getting any worse. The blood-brain barrier exists to prevent toxins from your blood and from your diet getting into the brain, but it also prevents drugs getting into the brain. So getting a drug like an mTOR inhibitor that can cross the blood-brain barrier much more easily has been a dream, and there's already research. So watch this space, and the next year, hopefully, we'll have something exciting to report. Next slide, please. Cannabidiol. So this has been a real advance. Next slide. I'm not sure whether. Oh no, back again. Oh, yeah. No, leave it there. Sorry. So cannabidiol. It is anticonvulsant, does affect seizures, but it also affects TSC tumor cells in animals, and it blocks developments of blood vessels that TSC tumors absolutely rely on. And this is a slide from last year where Andy T and the teams in Cardiff had already shown that this was very exciting. So the fact that cannabidiol will be eventually licensed and funded for epilepsy is going to be really good news. And one of the reasons to fight for it so hard is not just because of its anti-epileptic treatment, but because once it's freely available, it will be open season on research in altering the course of TSC by having a more fundamental mechanism. Next slide, please. Other treatments. Well, so again, there are various compounds that can kill TSC cells now, but they're quite toxic for use in humans. And gene therapy is the ultimate goal. And I think is achievable, but we haven't yet got there. It is possible in other conditions. And there are mechanisms to deliver gene therapy in TSC people, but we don't have quite the right tools or gene blockers yet. Next slide, please. But going back to the things that kill off TS cells, again, this is work from Cardiff, but there's similar work published from all around the world now on compounds like STAT3, REF1, which are toxic to TSC tumor cells, but also a little bit toxic to normal cells. And then combination treatments of things that actually are used for other conditions that can be given to patients for completely unrelated conditions, and therefore there is some track record. So it's always a balance between the benefit and the risk, and slowly people are working out which will be the best compounds to use and which should go forward to a proper human trial. Next slide, please. And what about supportive treatment? So I've already mentioned the effect of early intervention, which has, but there's also treatment of autism. Autism can be picked up very, very early, the age of 2 or sometimes younger. And if you start intervening with treatment for autism at that stage, it can make a big difference. So that's something that's being looked at actively by researchers. And sleep research. Stacey Bissell, who has been sponsored by research has been sponsored by TSA, has done some brilliant work with her eSnore and eSlept projects, looking at how to improve sleep and how to regularize it. And of course, that has secondary effects on improving psychological state and improving epilepsy. And then in terms of cannabidiol as a supported treatment, as an anti-epileptic, it will improve 20 to 30% of people refractory epilepsy. This compares to other conventional anticonvulsants, where once people have tried 2 or 3 conventional anticonvulsants, the chance of improvement is only 2 or 3%. With cannabidiol, it's 20 to 30%, which is why we're so keen to get it for the UK population. Everolimus, of course, has the same similar benefit, although it might be even greater. We're waiting to see. So then Tandem. Tandem is a project which is very exciting, and it's part funded by the TSA. Next slide, please. So just back to everolimus for psychological problems. There have been 2 small studies where they've looked at the effect of everolimus on TAND. And the results were a bit disappointing in both of them, but in both of them, these weren't ideal studies to pick it up. In the Darcy-Kruger study, it was aimed at epilepsy. Some of the patients had TAND, but the measures they were using to look at TAND, and this is Darcy-Kruger's own opinion, were not sensitive enough to pick up the changes they wanted to demonstrate. And I think looking at RS Overwater's study from Rotterdam, it's the same story. However, next slide, please. In a more specifically, in a very refined study done in Cardiff, in adults, you notice, where everolimus was tried for 6 months v placebo, there was a significant improvement in intellectual neurocognitive ability, which is something we notice in clinic in people we start on everolimus for epilepsy or for SAGA or for AMLs. There are certainly people whose intellectually improve, not hugely once they're adults, but can be significant and can be very useful and very helpful for people and their families. Next slide, please. Yes. So and if we go on to the next one, so Tandem. I'm going to finish now on Tandem. So time to everyone wake up and ask questions in a moment. Tandem is this big multinational product which is funded by the TSA and by King Bedouin Foundation. The TSA funding, which was significant, helped garner a much bigger grant from King Bedouin Foundation, which has been critical in making this very ambitious project entirely successful. So it's an app-based self-help program, essentially. It's based originally around the TAN checklist, TAN clusters, and it commenced just before COVID hit. And we had the initial kickoff meeting before then. Since then, it's progressed with all the researchers meeting by electronically, and there's been a recent catch-up meeting in South Africa to launch the next stage. Next slide, please. Basically, this is the overview, but it's designed to create an app based on a refinement of the checklist that would be useful for families with TSC to work out what their main issues are and what they could do about it now, and where they should go for help. Next slide, please. And I'll just illustrate that with the several clusters. You'll see in the purpley things in the second inner ring, TAND is divided into various bits, such as autistic-like problems, depression, neuropsychological, etc. And then there's the wraparound psychosocial cluster, which interacts with everything else, which is a bit that I've been helping specifically with. Next slide, please. And in that, the main topics covered in that cluster, just as an illustration of what the whole of TAND is about. It addresses people's self-esteem, stress, support, family relationships, and a general well-being and quality of life. Next slide, please. And then within each of these, there's on the app, there's a series of pages, and you start when you pick the psychosocial area, you can go on to stress, and then when you go onto the stress, it tells people what to look for and what they can do about it. Next slide, please. And and then there's, after that, there's a whole number of pages with lots of aspects and resources about where people can get what help there is available now, and identifying, or at least the process of going through it identifies what needs to be done next for research. So it's going to be very useful, and it's going to be coming out soon, and the TSA has been a major sponsor. So that's all I want to say for now. Thank you for listening, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Thank you for that whistle-stop tour that covered so much in such a short space of time. That was brilliant. Thank you. I think we have, I'm going to get the previous slide deck up again, because we've got now is our time for questions. So if anyone does have any questions, as I say, now is the time. Do please, you can put them in the chat, or there's also a Q&A function as well. We'll just give it 30 seconds, a minute or so, to see if there's any from anyone. But if you prefer to ask questions afterwards, please do so. As Pooja said, we'll be putting our personal contact details on the end of this slide as well, or you can contact us through any of the means, and we'll get back to you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I reiterate that. Yeah, thank you to Chris. Yeah, just wait. No, it doesn't look like there's any questions coming through. I'll just give it another second or so, just in case anyone's typing. Okay, well, I'm going to quickly share my screen for last time, just to hand back over to Sanjay to give our final note of thanks and whatnot.
Thanks, Luke. And there are a number of thank yous to give. So we note down all the trusts and foundations who gave a considerable amount of money to the charity. But I guess, yeah, we are still driving most of our income from the community. And so I guess there isn't a picture to put up to necessarily say thank you to the community, but we do acknowledge that the community fundraising that we get from all of the supporters of the TSA is enormous. And we are working really hard to ensure that continues. But we diversify those streams of income, whether that leads to this page being 3 more pages, being the Trust and Foundation page, would be incredible. Whether that leads to more permanent corporate sponsorship from a range of companies, that would also be incredible. But you know, we're really happy with all the support that we get from trusts and foundations, the community, and the corporates who are there for us now. Luke, did you say there's a question?
Yes, there is now. Janet, I'm going to see if I can get you. I'm going to click allow to talk, and hopefully that should allow you to speak. So let's just see. You may need to unmute yourself. Oh, I think we've got you, Janet. I think I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we've got you. Oh, success.
Brilliant. Thank you. I tried to type in during the questions bit and I couldn't manage it. First of all, thank you to everybody. It's not easy to do an AGM on Zoom, putting everybody together, and you've all been brilliant. So that is a tremendous thank you. The second part is sort of two subparts which are connected, and those are about the people, the grassroots community. I'm sure everybody is going to be very heartened by all the work that's going on in research that Chris has ever described brilliantly. But the majority of people are living in hope, waiting for this. And what's happening from the TSA to support them hasn't been very much highlighted. And in the list that Luke, you shared for the objectives for 2023, there wasn't actually anything about supporting the community. And the other thing about the community is, much as I and many, many people appreciate all the online stuff that the TSA has done, not everybody, unfortunately, has access to that. And that's part of reaching and supporting the overall community. Thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you as ever. And you're 100% right. Absolutely. And I should reiterate, in terms of what we'll be doing in 2023, our support to the TSA community, not only for the future, but now will absolutely continue. So the TSA support line, for example, will remain to be absolutely central to our support services. We'll continue to work very hard on all our support and information on our website, through SCAN, our various other materials as well. We'll continue to work very, very closely with NHS clinicians to make sure that they are signposting and telling their patients who live with TSA about us, so we can be that support arm. And it also connects into, as we did say, about peer-to-peer support as well. So we do want to try to get as many people as we can involved in that. So hopefully that helps. But I can 100% assure you that support for the TSA community now continues to be central, as well as that research to give hope for the future as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's thanks, Luke. I can see Chris wants to say something too. I think it's really important that, you know, we maybe didn't emphasize it enough, but we should, that, you know, we do equally prioritize support and research. I think there's also an acknowledgement that, you know, some of the money that was given to us as an endowment has contributed towards research. We have actively not sought to do new research grants or rounds going forward, and we are instead using the money in a more levered way to encourage other people to support our research aims. The money is really more effectively being used for support, and you can see that in kind of the deficit that we run as a charity. And so, you know, I think Rajan made the point in his trustee address as treasurer that, you know, we have a really small charity now in terms of people. And even with that small charity and our great community support and fundraising, we're still having to dig deep into effectively our savings to keep the support functions running, which is predominantly what we're doing. It's not like we're using that funding now to address research. So I think that's really important. I think also the last thing I want to say is, you know, we did this TSA census where we reached out to the community and we asked what the community wanted. And we're trying really hard to deliver that. And, you know, it's been hard with the pandemic to get people together. But, you know, hopefully that's all going to change and there'll be an opportunity to get people together again. It is a huge drain on our financial resources, though, to bring people together. And so it does come at a cost. But we acknowledge at the same time that if there's enough of that ground swell of support amongst the grassroots, that's how they want the community fundraising to be spent, then of course we listen to that. and we will continue to support those events. Chris.
Oh, yes. Thank you. So one of the opportunities we have is the clinics. So the clinic network is there, and I think it's somewhat underutilized in terms of meetings. It's something we did in the past, and it's relatively low cost for the TSA is to encourage regional meetings based on TSA clinics. The clinicians are very keen to do that kind of thing, to find venues to bring groups of families together to talk to them about TSA. It's also an opportunity for the families then to meet each other, but it's also very rewarding for the clinicians themselves. It enthuses them and helps drive them on for further work. So I think that's the problem is, of course, we've only just bedding in our new structure, and it takes time to get to grips with everything, and there's a limited amount of time for Paul Pooja and Luke, who've done a fantastic job. And I'd just like to say congratulations. The two halves make up much more than one whole. But so I think 2023 is will be exciting, but we need to give them a little bit more time to really get things underway.
Thank you for that. Was there any more questions? I'll just hold for a second. So you can raise your hand, your virtual hand, if there are any more. I think there are. Okay. Right. Okay. So
then there's just one final thank you.
Yeah.
And our final thank you is to obviously the staff at the TSA, who frankly keep the lights on and keep everything going. And you know, we definitely appreciate you. And certainly to the other trustees who I've mentioned before. But aside from those thank yous, we have a picture of Sir David Suchet up on the screen, and really that's kind of to highlight just the amount of extraordinary work he's done for us. Some of it really going into perpetuity in some respects, because he continues to donate the profits that he receives from his books, particularly one book which is called Behind the Lens, which I would encourage anyone to buy, because you're incidentally supporting the TSA by doing that, and it may make a great Christmas gift. But beyond that, I think we're slightly overrunning. So I'm going to say we're until next year.
Great, thank you all. I'm going to now, and yeah, it was great to get everyone together. It's nice to have a good number of people at this AGM, and nice to have the interaction. But just to reiterate once more, you know, me and Pooja are going to be working non-stop and tirelessly. We're a small team, but we'll be working non-stop for all of you. We can guarantee it. So keep an eye out for future events. Please do get in touch with us. Rather than put the slide up now, because we're overrunning, I'll share our details with everyone who signed up and whatnot. So that might be a bit easier. So yes, so thank you all. Pooja, do you have any final words?
Yeah, just final thank yous. Thank you to everyone. And as Luke said, we'll continue to deliver for our lovely TSA community. And just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll see you in 2023 with new spirits and new ideas, and look forward to meeting you at the face-to-face events.
Excellent. Okay, then thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.